The streets of Lexington, Kentucky, were illuminated by the golden radiance of the sun, which was situated low in the sky. As he sat in his patrol vehicle, Officer Mark Anderson adjusted his rearview mirror, idly scanning the traffic ahead. Emily Carter, his colleague, tapped her pen against her notepad, recording her observations from their previous conversation. They were parked in the vicinity of Ashland Avenue, where the neighborhood transitioned from modest single-family residences to upscale condominiums. That was the moment Mark's gaze fixed on a sleek black vehicle that was cruising past them. The driver, an African-American woman, was attired in a navy blue suit that was tailored to her liking. Her hair was carefully styled, and she maintained an upright and poised demeanor. Mark appeared to be irritated by something about her manner of comporting herself. "Look at that," he murmured, his voice reeking of contempt. "Expensive automobile. I suspect she is engaged in some illicit activity." Emily glanced up from her notes. She responded with caution. "She is not violating any laws or speeding. What is the issue?" Mark disregarded her and reached for the flashing lights. He smirked and said, "Let's investigate," as he pulled onto the road behind the vehicle. Before pulling over to the side of the roadway, the driver decelerated and executed a signal. Her movements were deliberate, almost practiced. Emily observed a minor stiffening of her shoulders through the rear window as Mark exited the patrol car and parked it. Emily whispered, "Mark, this doesn't feel right," as she hastened after him. "You lack probable cause," Mark yelled. "Rookie, remain seated," as his hand brushed against his scabbard. "I have been engaged in this activity for 2 decades. I am capable of identifying a suspect upon sight." Grace Williams was revealed as they approached, as the window was lowered. Her dark eyes surveyed the 2 officers with quiet determination, her expression composed yet cautious. "Good evening, officers," Grace said in a dispassionate manner. "Is there an issue?" Mark leaned in, casting a shadow on the interior of her vehicle. He ignored her inquiry, and yelled, "Registration and license." Grace gingerly moved her hands to retrieve her documents, placing them on the dashboard before sliding them over. Emily attentively observed the slight tremor in Grace's fingers. Her instincts informed her that there was an issue, not with Grace but with Mark. He had transitioned from a routine demeanor to an excessively combative one. Mark's tone was abrasive as he examined Miss Williams' documents and inquired, "What brings you to this part of town?" Grace maintained a measured tone of voice as she slightly inclined her head. "I am en route to a meeting." Mark's mandible curled. There must be a meeting taking place, as the vehicle is being operated in this manner. Emily experienced the formation of a knot in her midsection. The interaction was beginning to be observed by passers-by, and the tension was palpable. Her voice was subdued as she approached Mark. "Mark, she is collaborating. Let us refrain from escalating the situation." The driver's door handle was already being pulled by Mark. He instructed, his grasp tightening around the door, "Exit the vehicle." Grace's composure briefly wavered. She inquired, her voice firm yet composed, "Is there a rationale for this?" Mark yanked the door open, growling, "I said step out." Grace deliberated her movements as she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped onto the pavement. Emily's pulse pounded as she observed Mark use excessive force to grab Grace's arm, causing her to be dragged to the side of the vehicle. Grace staggered slightly and collided with the doorframe. Emily stepped forward and exclaimed, "That is sufficient." Although her voice wavered, she maintained her composure. "She has not committed any infractions." Mark directed his gaze toward her. "Rookie, please refrain from participating in this activity." Grace confronted Mark's gaze by straightening her jacket. "This is harassment, Officer Anderson," she declared, her voice remaining unwavering. "I am aware of my rights." Mark leaned in, smirking. "In this location, rights are defined by my assertions." Grace's mandible contracted, but she refused to yield. Emily, who was situated only a few feet away, experienced a sudden surge of conflicting emotions, including a heightened sense of responsibility, anger, and terror. This was not merely another traffic halt. This was a much more significant event. The tension surrounding the vehicle was akin to a tempest that was on the brink of erupting. Mark tightened his grasp on Grace's arm as he pushed her toward the side of the vehicle. The contents of her purse, which included a small notepad, a phone, and keys, were scattered across the pavement as it toppled from her shoulder. Grace maintained her composure despite exhaling abruptly. Grace's tone was abrupt but controlled as she stated, "This is entirely superfluous. I have fulfilled all of your requests." Mark snorted as he crouched down to search through her possessions without her consent. His movements were deliberate and calculated, as if he were in quest of an explanation for his actions. "What is the purpose of a woman like you operating a vehicle of this nature?" he murmured. Emily approached with her hands clasped at her sides. "Mark, this is not in accordance with protocol. We lack probable cause to search her belongings." Mark did not even bother to glance up as he waved her off. "You have a great deal to learn, novice. This is how you maintain the cleanliness of the streets." Grace's voice became more resolute. "Officer Anderson, you are infringing upon my rights. There is no justification for conducting a search of my property." As if it were a piece of incriminating evidence, Mark straightened and held up one of her credit cards. "You are not permitted to lecture me, lady. You are currently in my hometown." A small group of individuals began to congregate on the sidewalk, their murmurs becoming increasingly audible. Numerous individuals were utilizing their smartphones to capture the event. Grace observed, but she refused to divert her attention from Mark. Emily saw Mark step back toward the car, his hand sliding into his pocket, and her chest constricted. When she observed a small plastic bag between his fingers, a bag that he had not taken from Grace's possessions, her pulse quickened. "Mark," Emily hissed, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper, "what are you engaged in?" He declined to respond. Rather, he leaned into the vehicle and concealed the luggage beneath the driver's seat. As if he had discovered a treasure, he dramatically raised his hands and turned back to the audience. Mark loudly declared, "Well, well," while holding the white powder container in front of everyone. "It appears that we are experiencing a minor drug issue." Grace's eyes widened, and a combination of astonishment and anger flashed across her face. She assertively stated, "That is not mine," as she advanced toward him. "You have just placed that item in my vehicle." Mark's demeanor was characterized by derision, as evidenced by his smirking. "That is a charming narrative, Miss Williams. However, it is not likely to endure." The crowd's voices were filled with disbelief, as they murmured loudly. Emily was overcome by a sudden sensation of vertigo. She had observed it occur. The evidence had been planted by Mark. She was aware that it was unethical, and that she should speak up, but her fear kept her in her position. Grace's eyes were beseeching as she directed her attention to Emily. "You observed his actions. Kindly communicate your thoughts." Emily's larynx was constricted, her voice entrapped between her conscience and her apprehension of retribution. Mark's gaze was palpable, compelling her to express herself. His gaze seemed to convey the message that you should remain silent, or you will regret it. However, Emily was unable to escape the memory of Mark concealing the bag in Grace's vehicle. Her father's words reverberated in her consciousness, a lesson that he had instilled in her since she was a child. Integrity is a challenging virtue, but it is the foundation of a morally upright individual. "Mark," Emily said, her voice quivering but still audible, "this is incorrect." She was approached by Mark, who was visibly enraged. "You are not knowledgeable about the subject matter. Please refrain from speaking." Grace's voice remained unwavering, despite the fury that was coursing through her. She stood tall. "You are unable to escape this situation through intimidation. Your partner and I are both aware of the situation." Mark's hand was resting ominously near his scabbard as he approached Grace. "Do you believe that you are impenetrable, solely because you possess a luxurious automobile?" Emily abruptly exclaimed. "That is sufficient." Although her pulse beat rapidly, she refused to yield. "You are exceeding the acceptable limit." The spectacle was now under the weight of the crowd's gaze, which had increased in size. Mark hesitated, as he surveyed the observers. He clenched his mandible, but refrained from speaking. Grace exhaled deeply, and gazed at Emily, her voice composed yet authoritative. "I appreciate your contribution, however. This is not the conclusion." Emily nodded, a glimmer of resolve fluttering in her heart. She felt as though she had the fortitude to make a statement for the first time. Mark's expression contorted into a sneer, as he redirected his attention to Grace. The crowd continued to observe, their phones elevated, as they documented every second. He drew nearer to her, his voice a low growl intended solely for her. "Do you believe that you are more intelligent than I am?" Do you believe that these individuals will be of assistance to you? Grace confronted his gaze directly. I am confident that I am more intelligent than you, Officer Anderson. You have just committed the most significant error of your career. Mark briefly lost his composure, but he promptly concealed it with a scoff. He extracted the handcuffs from his waistband and proceeded to approach Grace. You are currently being held in custody for the possession of a controlled substance. Emily experienced a sensation of having her oxygen caught in her throat. This was it, the moment when she was compelled to choose between her career and her conscience. Her father's voice reverberated in her mind once more. If you fail to advocate for what is just, you are just as culpable as those who commit wrongdoing. No, Emily abruptly stated, her voice piercing the tension like a knife. She positioned herself between Grace and Mark, raising her arms in a defensive stance. You are aware that this is incorrect. Mark's visage was red with rage. Rookie, please vacate the area. I will not be obligated to report you for insubordination. Emily's voice fluctuated, but she refrained from moving. I observed you planting that evidence. I will not participate in this. A ripple of astonishment spread through the onlookers as the crowd gasped. Grace's demeanor slightly relaxed, and she fixed her attention on Emily. Thank you, she said quietly. Mark's rage reached boiling point. He approached Emily, pointing his finger at her chest. You are finished. Do you hear me? I will ensure that you never wear that badge again. Emily squared her shoulders, summoning every ounce of fortitude she possessed. If it is necessary to act in accordance with the law, then so be it. Grace, understanding that the situation was approaching a critical juncture, elected to voice her opinion. She addressed him as Officer Anderson, her tone remaining composed and authoritative. You may wish to exercise caution when considering your subsequent actions. Mark's laughter was acrid. That's right. And what's the reason for that? Grace moved slowly and deliberately as she reached into the pocket of her outerwear. Despite the tension between the two officers, she maintained her composure. She extracted a leather badge holder and opened it, revealing her credentials. My name is Captain Grace Williams, she stated, her demeanor remaining composed yet authoritative. I have assumed the role of commanding officer for this precinct. Silence prevailed for a brief period. Mark gazed at the insignia, his mouth opening and closing in a manner reminiscent of a fish out of water. The weight of the revelation struck Emily, causing her limbs to weaken. Mark's confidence was in tatters, as he muttered, That is impossible. You are not capable of. Grace interrupted him. You did not even inquire about my status before determining that I was a criminal, did you? However, it is irrelevant to my identity. Every individual is entitled to respect, and they should not be assessed based on their skin color or the vehicle they drive. The crowd's murmurs caused Mark's face to turn pallid. Others shouted at him in anger, while others applauded. The actuality of his actions, which had recently been disclosed, appeared to be setting in. Emily took a small step back, her mind whirling. Grace's demeanor softened as she turned to her. Officer Carter, I am appreciative of your courage in speaking out. It is not an easy task, but it is the right thing to do. Emily forced herself to inhale forcefully, her voice quivering. I regret that I did not act sooner. A subtle smile was visible on Grace's lips as she nodded. You executed the task when it was critical. That is what is significant. Mark, who was still in a state of disbelief, eventually discovered his voice. Captain, I am capable of providing an explanation. No, Grace abruptly interrupted him. You are unable to do so. The actions you committed today are in direct opposition to the principles of this badge. Please surrender your weapon and badge. Your suspension will take effect immediately. Mark's hand trembled as he unclipped his insignia and holster. Grace received an unwelcome stare from him. His expression was a combination of disbelief and wrath. You are incapable of accomplishing this task. You are unaware of the conditions that exist in this region. I have been safeguarding these streets for 2 decades. Grace's expression remained unwavering. Protecting. Is that the term you use to describe this? Mark, how many lives have you ruined with your prejudice? How many individuals have you falsely accused in order to satisfy your ego? The audience, now inspired by Grace's presence, began to shout for justice.
A woman in the front shouted, "You are a disgrace to the uniform." Another individual commented, "We have been addressing this matter for years." Emily's nerves were fraying as she peered at the expanding crowd. This was no longer solely about Mark. It was about a system that had allowed officers such as him to operate without oversight. The commotion was silenced as Grace stepped forward, her voice resonating with authority. Grace turned to address the audience, saying, "This is not solely about me. It is about ensuring that no one is above the law, not even those who are sworn to uphold it. It is about holding individuals like him accountable." Mark's face flushed as he approached Grace. "You believe that you are a hero. You are unaware of the reality of interacting with the genuine criminals in this area. You remain confined to a desk, while I am out there risking my life." Grace's serene demeanor remained unwavering as she raised an eyebrow. "And you believe that this justifies the planting of evidence, using your authority to intimidate and degrade innocent individuals. You are not endangering your life, Mark. You are causing harm to others." Emily's chest contracted as she observed the conversation. Although she had always been aware of the system's vulnerabilities, the sight of them so close was disconcerting. Grace's voice softened as she returned her attention to Emily. Grace addressed Officer Carter. "I understand that this is a difficult situation for you, but speaking up today required courage. Do not lose sight of that." Emily's voice was scarcely audible, as she nodded slowly. "I will not." Mark, who was still clutching his insignia, gazed at Grace with a combination of desperation and resentment. "Captain, you are making a mistake. Individuals such as yourself are not likely to remain in this position for an extended period." Grace approached him, her gaze fixed on him. "Do you mean individuals who are committed to justice and equality, such as myself? If that is an error, I am willing to accept it." Mark's objections were drowned out by the crowd's ecstatic applause. Grace addressed the individual who was closest to her, and expressed her gratitude for documenting the event. She requested that they ensure that it was disseminated. Mark's visage contorted in anger. "You are discrediting me for the sake of optics. This is all a sham." Grace maintained her composure. "No, Mark, this is accountability, a concept that you evidently lack comprehension." The sound of approaching sirens intensified, indicating the presence of backup. Mark reluctantly relinquished his badge and holster as Grace stood erect, her presence commanding. His bravado crumbled under the weight of what had just occurred, and his shoulders sagged. Emily observed the scene with a roller coaster of emotions, a sense of hope she had not experienced in years, remorse and relief. A second patrol car approached, and two officers emerged, their gazes alternating between the throng and the scene in front of them. Grace directed them with a firm and unmistakable voice. "Officers, Mr. Anderson is suspended pending a comprehensive investigation. Please escort him to the precinct." A more intense hue of red emerged on Mark's visage. "You cannot be serious. This is my precinct, my team." Grace did not even glance at him as she responded, "Not any longer." The officers reluctantly led Mark away, and the crowd applauded. Some individuals shouted their support for Grace, while others demanded retribution for the numerous individuals Mark had wronged over the years. Grace's voice rose above the din as she turned to address the throng. "This is merely the beginning," she declared, her demeanor unwavering. "Today, we are speaking out against corruption and prejudice, but our actions do not conclude here. It is incumbent upon each of us to demand accountability and guarantee that our system functions effectively for all." The audience responded with a chorus of agreement and a surge of applause. Emily experienced a lump in her esophagus as she grasped the gravity of the situation. This was not solely about Grace or Mark. It was about the community regaining its confidence in the individuals who were intended to safeguard them. Grace approached Emily, her expression softening, as the scene began to wind down. She stated, "You made the correct decision today. I am aware that it was challenging." Emily's voice was scarcely audible, as she nodded. "I was apprehensive. I was uncertain if I would be able to recover everything." Grace placed a reassuring hand on Emily's shoulder. "You did not lose anything that is significant. Our integrity is what distinguishes us, not the badge." Emily blinked back tears, experiencing a sense of accomplishment that she had not experienced since she first joined the force. She comprehended the essence of genuine service and protection for the first time. Cameras were already in operation when a local news crew arrived. Grace exhaled deeply, anticipating that the limelight would be illuminated to an unprecedented degree. She addressed the camera with a composed yet authoritative tone. The events that transpired today serve as a reminder that no individual is exempt from the law, not even those who are obligated to enforce it, she stated. We still have a long way to go, but change begins with moments like this. Emily retreated, allowing Grace to assume the lead as the crew recorded each word. She peered at the crowd, which was now dispersing but still exuded an atmosphere of determination and optimism. This represented the commencement of a new chapter for Emily, one in which she could finally fulfill the obligations of the oath she had taken. Grace saw it as an opportunity to transform a dysfunctional system from within. Additionally, it served as a catalyst for a more extensive justice movement within the community. Mark's patrol vehicle vanished down the road as the sirens faded into the distance. Grace and Emily stood together, prepared to confront whatever lay ahead.